I'm going to start by giving a brief background on learning theory and its implications for digital learning and training. So pedagogy literally means the method and practice of teaching, and pedagogy is sometimes used as a general term, but more often it's used to refer to teaching and learning for children and young people, and that's how we'll be using the term here. In contrast, andragogy is the method and practice of teaching adult learners, and the theory of andragogy was developed by Malcolm Knowles, who made the following assumptions about the design of learning. 1, adults need to know why they need to learn something. 2, adults need to learn experientially. 3, adults approach learning as problem solving. And 4, adults learn best when the topic is of immediate value. So, what's the difference between pedagogy and andragogy? As this table shows, there are a number of different factors that contribute to the ways we approach learning design for children and adults. For example, most adults are intrinsically motivated to learn, while children tend to be extrinsically motivated and need that extra little push. Adults also come into training and learning opportunities with a lot more life experience than children do, so they often have more contributions to make to the learning experience. So now that we kind of have an idea of the difference between teaching children and teaching adults, pedagogy and andragogy, I wanted to ask you all, what do you think this means for training, and for digital training in particular? And as you think about this question, I want you to keep in mind your organization's beneficiaries. And if you'd like to contribute, you can type your answer in the chat. So I'll give about a minute for that. So Claire has mentioned that adults may need practical examples and learning, even while they're working, which is very true. Does anybody have anything else to contribute? Someone has also said the methods of delivery may vary. Adults need content they can directly relate to. Adults listen by choice. Adults normally tell you when they have time for training. That's very true. You need to understand what an adult wants to get out of the training and adapt accordingly. These are great. So there are still some responses coming in. Thank you. So in light of these obvious differences, I wanted to share a few tips and tricks on creating digital content for children and adults. For children, it's best to develop content and learning experiences that are based on familiar concepts. These can be topics they've covered in school or in an informal setting. Questions, lessons, or topics should have varying levels of difficulty so that every learner remains engaged. Children, as we said, are also extrinsically motivated to learn, so building in motivation to a digital learning experience is very helpful. This could be something like a leaderboard or simply providing verbal encouragement. Material aimed at children should contain vocabulary, sentence structure, and wording that is developmentally appropriate for the age group. And finally, the digital learning opportunity should be straightforward and easy for children to navigate on their own. It's a little bit different for adults. So we know that adults need to understand why they're learning. They also need to be able to connect the lesson topic to one of their needs, problems, or interests. Adults also learn best when the topic is of immediate value to them. In this way, you can frame lessons using case studies, scenarios, role-playing, simulations, and self-evaluation. You can also give learners control over their learning by making either the pace or the sequence of learning flexible. We also know that adults are very busy people. So chunking information helps people remember and assimilate it, as we know that small bits of information are easier to process than large. And finally, adults need to be involved in the planning and evaluation of their instruction. So be sure to give opportunities for feedback and to use that feedback to iterate on the learning opportunity. In this way, some of the major benefits of digital training for adults are the opportunity to give and receive immediate feedback, the ability to train remotely, and the self-paced nature of these learning opportunities. So we know that video and web-based training are very common, and they're typically easy for people to visualize. Before I begin explaining how we transform in-person trainings into digital trainings, have a look at an SMS training that M-Shule developed to get a better understanding of what SMS training can actually look like. You'll see examples of a scenario and some multiple choice questions being presented to the learner. The first step in transforming a training is figuring out who our learners are. We do this by creating user personas, which shed light on the why of the training. What are our learners' needs, wants, and problems? This also helps ensure that learning is designed appropriately for the target audience. The next step is to gather existing materials to use as a starting point. These might be in-house materials. By using existing training materials, we can ensure that learning is consistent across modalities. Sometimes we need to supplement with external research depending on the volume of content desired. That research is conducted by our experienced learning team. The third step in the transformation process is creating a scope and sequence. This might take the form of the image that you see now or a knowledge map. The scope is the breadth of material to be covered, such as the topics and subtopics, and it depends largely on the wants, needs, and problems of the learners as identified in the user personas. The sequence, on the other hand, is the order in which the material is covered. Like I mentioned before, it's best if sequencing can be flexible for adult learners, but if that's not possible, we try to organize the topics in a logical way and so that they build upon each other. Next, we use the scope and sequence to break down topics into bite-sized chunks. So from topics, we get subtopics, individual lessons, and then individual content items. We know that smaller chunks of information are easier to process and ensure a higher rate of retention. When designing lessons, we also make sure that each lesson is able to function as a standalone learning opportunity, because we know that adults move at their own pace and may sit down and only do one lesson at a time. After breaking down our content, we use our user personas to develop a scenario or story that the learners can relate to. And this is the start of the actual content creation process. All of our adult training content begins with a scenario or a story that is relevant to the learners. As we know, adults learn best when learning is couched in highly relatable, problem-based scenarios. The development of these scenarios is again informed by our user personas and is highly contextualized. In a financial literacy lesson on personal budgeting, you might find a scenario in which a family runs out of money each month before the end of the month and wants to break out of this cycle. Once this scenario has been presented, learners are taken through a series of multiple choice questions. We use multiple choice format because it lends itself to easier data collection and analysis than with things like open-ended questions. And these questions are created to when we create these questions, we ensure that the learner can answer them using either their own prior knowledge, the scenario that's presented in the lesson, their critical thinking skills, or a combination of the three. In a financial literacy lesson on accessing formal financial institutions, for example, learners may be asked about the benefits of formal institutions, even when this hasn't been explicitly presented to them in the scenario. Each multiple choice question that a learner is presented with has hints attached to it. Then the learner is presented with these hints when choosing an incorrect answer. These hints are designed to gently nudge the learner in the right direction without providing the actual answer to the question. And this allows us to scaffold the learning experience and support learners at all levels, which also keeps motivation up. When a learner chooses the correct answer, they're presented with an explanation which elaborates on why the answer is correct, also reinforcing their learning. Once learners have answered all of the multiple choice questions for a lesson, which are typically 5 per lesson, they're presented with a related practical activity to try at home, which can help concretize their learning from the lesson. In a financial literacy lesson on budgeting, personal budgeting, we might ask learners to create their own budget, follow it for a month, and record the outcome. This will necessitate using what they have learned during the lesson. Finally, our content undergoes rigorous testing. We pay keen attention to all feedback given, then use this feedback to improve on or expand the learning experience. In a financial literacy micro course, learners might tell us that now that they know how to make a personal budget, for example, they want more information on wise investment practices. I would now like to talk a little bit about the impact that SMS-based training can have and the results we've seen at M-Shule. Using our platform, your organization can track your learners in real time while they're learning. This can help you to identify issues and successes as they occur. And here is an example of what a dashboard looks like, which can help you to track learning. M-Shule has also seen great success in providing SMS-based training to adults. For example, we recently transformed a livelihood skills training for refugees in Kenya from in-person training to SMS-based training. As you can see, this learning opportunity produced great results, and the feedback we received from participants was also very good.